And my presentation will share my own experience at the Museum of Anthropology and Ethnography of the University of Turin, where I work as a cultural anthropologist and curator, and where I am dealing with ethnographic collection from extra-European context. And let me just say that MAET is a small reality with small budget and often small support from the institution it belongs. So I must say that before to go on. The museum was founded in 1926, and it is part of the University of Turin museum system. And sadly, since 1984, that is for almost 40 years, the museum has been closed to the public due to the lack of adequate spaces for a permanent display. Despite being a closed museum in the past few years, research and public engagement activities have been restarted, especially with regard to extra-European collection, ethnographic and archaeological. Furthermore, cooperative relations with other museums have been renewed, especially with Museo Egizio, with which we share the heritage dating back to the excavation activities of the Italian archaeological mission in Egypt. And as you may imagine, the activities of a closed museum today cannot ignore digital strategies. And in this presentation, I would like to bring up a reflection on how digitization can be a good way to cope museum closure and to address its colonial nature. After about 5 years of working at MAET as a cultural anthropologist, I must admit that today I feel I am speaking from a rather uncomfortable position. And the first reason why mine is an uncomfortable position certainly has to do with the museum past and the scientific and ideological premises that led to its founding and to the creation of heritage it preserves. And in this slide, I tried to summarize in a few points the history of the museum that only recently has been declared and deconstructed, at least through scientific research and publication. And as you can see, the founding of the museum is closely linked to Giovanni Marro adherence to fascist ideology and to racial theories. To this, we must add the condition of darkness and silence that characterize both the history of the museum and its collection locked in storage. MAET preserves what ICOM has called a sensitive heritage that requires sensitive reflection that for a long time have not been given. The second reason why my position is uncomfortable is that so far there seems to be no prospect to reopening the museum and the returning its heritage to the city and to the public. And sadly, there is not a political will to do so, both at university and city level. And this is, in my opinion, the real issues for the museum and the maintenance of a closure that actually preserves the confrontation, prevents, the confrontation and dialogue on an heritage that is as interesting, as difficult and sensitive as well. And in my opinion, to paraphrase what Dan Hicks argued about Pitt Rivers Museum policies on African collection, it can be said that for every day MAET remains closed to the public is a day when the scientific and ideological assumption with which it was founded and its intrinsic colonial nature are reaffirmed. So for the reason I feel uncomfortable is somehow, but for this same reason, it is useful to look at the strategies enacted by MAET in recent years to overcome the uncomfortableness in which it survives. And in this sense, digitization is one of the pivotal nodes in the life of the museum. Before proceeding, I would like to briefly mention some theoretical insight that led my research on MAET and that can resonate with issues faced by a museum that preserve and exhibit heritage from places and times older than our own. The first insight that I will only mention is the awareness that collecting and preserving objects and artifacts that solicit our imagination regarding alterity is closely connected to the power hierarchies that involve our society in relation to others. The museum is a space where ideas and practices cross the Western desire to appropriate the other and the power to do so. Moreover, as Susan Stewart stated, speaking of British Victorian houses, collecting and exhibiting objects from elsewhere has to do with strategies for constructing our intimate self and always involve in varied degrees processes of decontextualization and re-signification of the material culture and the subject connected to it. But contemporary instance, however, call for one step further in the critical comprehension of the heritage that come from other times and other spaces. Often, as in the case of MAET, collection histories and modes of acquisition and preservation recall past that which is difficult to reconcile with a positive, self-affirming contemporary identity. Heritage can be not only sensitive, but also difficult and dissonant, as it requires to address clearly and critically those nodes in our society history that cannot be understood in the positive self-construction of dominance groups. And it is not a coincidence that we have to wait until 2020s to see published contribution that reconstructed Giovanni Mauro's story as a fascist and racist and shed light on MAET's difficult past. Those research and publication was discouraged by those who were closest to the institution when my colleagues and I started researching the archives. And it is still very difficult to bring out the highly colonial nature of museum collection and practices. And talking about practices regarding museum and archives, it is impossible not to mention the total lack of documentation regarding MAET ethnographic collection. The silence of the archives is never accidental. A mere corollary of the anthropological collection considered most worthy, until very recently, ethnographic objects of non-European production were understood and displayed to document first Giovanni Mauro racist theories and then the human being evolution. Always, since very recently, with clear attribution mistakes and scientific ambiguities. And to conclude this first theoretical part, I would like to consider Claire Bishop's critical work regarding modern and contemporary art museums as food for thought. Her proposal for a radical museology can be applied to other types of museum as well. In particular, I find useful to take up her invitation to bring out the different temporalities that crystallize on the material surface of artifacts and artworks. And above all, to question practices and meanings that change during the social life of object and heritage. This would provide access to discourses concerning the life and political role of museums. So, questioning the history of the Museum of Anthropology through the lens of this assumption, with a special focus on extra-European ethnographic and photographic collection, has led to a kind of review of past display models. And as I mentioned earlier, the museum first displayed dating back 1926 used the ethnographic object and images as an objective document of racist, an objective evidence of racist and evolutionist theories. And the collection from elsewhere were considered worth attention only because they were exotic and little care was given about the subject and societies that produce them. The same we can say for the period between 60s and 80s. The permanent exhibition was dedicated to the evolution of human beings and included the display of ethnographic objects and images with no kind of contextualization and with no research or studies about the provenance of the object. We do not have many information about the last phases of history of the museum. We just found the documents a few days ago, so I'm still working. We are still working on that. So some continuities emerge that need to be cleared and deconstructed today so as to overcome an approach that sees the museum engaged in a kind of monologue, as Maria Elena said before me, based on the unspoken about MAET history. And the museum today needs to undertake strategies that engage possible audiences and communities that can identify themselves with the heritage. And in this sense, I believe that technology and digitization campaigns can be extremely useful in responding to the demands of a new definition of a museum that invoke new keywords: accessibility, inclusiveness, knowledge sharing, and participation. And indeed, digital can include operations that integrate the management in-house of the museum, and at the same time the public engagement activities. And in my opinion, most interesting, it can be a functional tool to mitigate that authoritative monologue of the cultural institution and to replay to the call of the contemporary and to the co-production of knowledge. Then here there are some examples from the last few years of work at MAET. And at first we have experienced how digitization processes can involve the study and reorganization of the heritage. We do have very few information about the heritage. Then Catholic campaign has been an occasion to go deeper on that. And in particular, we are working very hard on the cataloging campaign planned by the Italian Ministry of Culture and the CIGIC web software that we used, and that has many critical issues, I can say, but in fact, it has become a space for us to systematize the results of research regarding the collection. Between 2020 and 2021, the Strategia e Fotografia founding enabled us to enable the complete digitization of MAET's photography collection. And this has enabled a more in-depth study of the image, which through cataloging as well are now accessible to museum staff, researchers, and the public. The two activities I have just mentioned enable knowledge and heritage sharing operation. And in particular, recently MAET participated at the Museo Egizio Archivi Riuniti project by sharing about 160 photographs from the Gebelein excavation. Parallel to the cataloging activity, the Italian Institute for Catalog provides an online open access catalog through which it is possible to find and freely download catalographic records of artifacts preserved by Italian museums. MAET has already published about 1,500 records concerning Egyptian, ethnographic, archaeological, art, and photographic collection. The study and the cataloging of the collection then allowed to us to experiment with a few public engagement activities, such as podcasts, web talks, and meetings, as those organized on the occasion of Archivissima, a national public event focused on archives. We choose to propose to the public themes in line with our heritage and contemporary sensibility, such as, for example, the presence of women in images from colonial origin, the historical relationship connected MAET with other museums and with Italian society in a wider sense, and the presence in our archives of maps and images dating back to Italian colonial history in Africa. Some other attempts have been made in co-production of knowledge by involving Turin University students in the creation of text and video content shared both on the museum website and social channels. This activity began in 2020 during the COVID lockdown and continues very organically with the collaboration with thesis students and trainees who attend our museum and study the collection. So it is a co-production of knowledge about heritage shared thanks to the words and the work of researchers and students together. To facilitate surpassing the academic monologue regarding the museum and the heritage, we have also attempted to promote micro-knowledge co-production activities with Turin citizens belonging to the diaspora communities. This is the case with the video shot on the occasion of the exhibition The Anthropologist's Gaze, set up here at Museo Egizio in 2020. The video is the results of a campaign of interviews with young students of African descent with whom we visited MAET and the Museo Egizio, and the interview were about their impression on African and Egyptian heritage and the idea of whether or not Egypt could be considered an Black African country. And to conclude, more recently, we have initiated a collaboration with the Intercultural Center of the city of Turin, with whom we conducted a participatory activity as part of the exhibition Africa, the Forgotten Collection, now open Musei Reali here in Turin. The exhibit displays ethnological and art pieces from Africa preserved in Turin Museum. And this very small project involved a few diaspora associations and a group of Turin citizens with African origins who participated to a focus group to approach the heritage displayed in the exhibition. And after our meetings, some of the participants shared their feelings through video interview. The result is a collective video that was included in the exhibition and 10 short interviews that you can find on our YouTube channel and on our website, and that we will spread on social media in the coming weeks. The interview gave space to the voices and opinions of the so-called new Italian citizen who, with their ideas and knowledge, can, indeed they must contribute to academic and museum knowledge about the heritage that in some way represents them. Again, I must say it was not easy to promote such activity, despite it was a simple project. Within the organization, the big machine of the exhibition, and the exhibition needed a lot of curatorial work in researching and studying the collection, but we did it. I would like to conclude by saying that the activities promoted by the Museum of Anthropology that I briefly mentioned are in fact just experiments, waiting the museum reopens and waiting a moment when we can plan, organize strategies and policies in a more concrete way. That said, however, I think our experience is a clear example of how technology and digital activities can be an essential junction in the current conception of what a museum is. So not only technology implementation and refinement of research and data collection, but also strategies to answer to the question of what the contemporary museum should be, and to answer to the call of the 2022 ICOM definition. And despite I'm not sure that it would be possible to overcome the colonial nature of museum institution, I think there are many ways to address it, and use the digital can be one of them. Thank you.